what I wanted to focus on mainly was your print ads, billboards. Because if you can make a message effective in a quarter page ad, you're in good shape. If you can go ahead and communicate that in a billboard where you have 30 seconds from the time you see it on the horizon until it's gone, you can take that message and then effectively stretch that out into bigger pieces where people are able to take the time to read those things. So what I wanted to do is kind of focus on some of these things. Back in 1892, this was your best way of getting your message across to people. It was in a newspaper or a periodical, but you really only had one chance. So in this ad, which is roughly 3 inches by 1.5 inches, you had to cram all of this information 125 years ago. Now today, we're fortunate that we have so many other ways to get our message out there, be it websites, be it your social media campaigns, your emails, those kind of things. But most of us don't have tons and tons of money to spend where we've got this unlimited budget. We're working on sometimes a shoestring, sometimes it's grant dollars. You have to make sure that you can kind of maximize the money that you're spending with the message. But a lot of the times we feel like we have a 3x5 ad, so we need to say everything that we can possibly say. And with a lot of the things that we're showing up here are more focused on the retail side of it. But again, a lot of nonprofits tend to think that because you're a nonprofit and because you have this great cause, people are going to flock to you. And that's not always the case. So what we need to do with our messaging is go ahead and take a look at the great retailers and how they're pushing that message forward because they're bringing that audience in. What can we learn from those people? So if we have this 3x5 print ad that's right here, you're so confused by what you're seeing, you're not sure where to start with it. And a lot of nonprofits, when we work with them, they come in and they say, we have $200 to spend. We want to say as much as we possibly can so everybody knows if they look at this print ad, every single thing that we do. The problem is that your message gets cluttered and nobody remembers anything. So what we want to do with all of our messaging is consider different ways that we can create that hierarchy of information. So in this regard, if we're doing a simple print ad, a simple sales slick, the things that we want to keep in mind is we want to make sure that our logo is somewhere, that there's a high contrast so you can see the organization itself, an area for that call to action so they know how to contact you. And then we want to go ahead and kind of play with some headlines and those kind of things. But we want something that's nice and crisp so we have that hierarchy of information. What is most important? You want people to remember your name and how to contact you. And then secondly, you want your piece of your message. And what we want to do with that is focus on what is the one important thing. If that is your, as Harry said, your case statement, what is your mission? You want people to know who you are and what you do if you have one thing that you can say. We want to make sure that we're focusing on something like that. If it's, and again, this is more retail based, but again, there's so much to be learned from this where once we look at this ad, landscapes for a living, this is how much it's going to cost for an application. This is where we want to get in touch with somebody. It's much different than this, where there's so much to look at, we're not sure what's going on. So if we're using this in a nonprofit status, if we have all of our events upcoming on the right-hand side, if we have our case statement over here, and we have everything else that we do here, everything gets lost. So when you're looking at something like this, that is essentially a 3x5 ad, how effectively can we create that message? The same thing, again, with billboards. I know most of us aren't going to be running billboards, but there's something to be said for a message that you can grasp within 30 seconds. And even within that 30 seconds, from the time that you see a billboard on the horizon to the time you pass it is roughly 27 to 30 seconds. But most of the time when we look at that message, we're driving, so we'll glance over. Most people will only look over 2 seconds tops because they'll come back to it. If your message is important enough that you can look again, you may grab that 3 times. So essentially you have 6 seconds to grab your message. So there's something to be learned from a billboard where you want to get that information across, you want people to remember it. How can we utilize that in our communications? So on something like this, you're not remembering much of anything. The logo itself gets so lost in what's happening here. You can find the location, but it's very tough to find. Lakeshore is here with us today. We worked with Lakeshore on some of their billboards. When we talked to them, they're known as the Lakeshore, the voice of Northwest Indiana, but to them, the most important thing was where to find them on the dial. So if you glance at this really quick, 89.1 is what you see. You don't even have to worry about the FM because you're not going to find 89.1 on an AM station. You're not going to find them on a satellite radio. That's the most important thing. The second was, what are you going to find on 89.1 FM? News, sports, traffic, and weather. And then, again, the logo down there. Now, with a little bit of the brand, what we wanted to do was, off of their logo, they have the wireless signal that's coming up. We wanted that to come to show that you're getting that from the station itself. The same thing here. We're able to use a little bit of a visual aspect to it, that at 89.1 FM, you're going to get 4 things: news, sports, traffic, and weather. But the visual goes against the traffic, so you can kind of see that they tie into, not goes against, but you can see that they tie together. So that's the important thing. If you can communicate your message succinctly within 6 to 8 seconds, when you're able to get their attention for 30, 40 seconds, even a minute and a half where they've got a sales slick in front of them, everything kind of trickles down from there. Again, going back to the retail aspect, there's a lot to be learned from this. When you're using a short burst message, it's great to go ahead and decide what you want that message to be. If it's going to be your brand itself, where to find you, your product, so we can go ahead and put something out that we want to push in a specific time period, if it's an event or there's a certain program that you want to push. Decide what is going to be the most effective message to get in front of somebody. Or is it your experience? For Lake Mortgage, as we work with them, again, your hierarchy of information is your logo, your call today, you see your call to action with easy information up there, and then as we talked to Lake Mortgage, we came up with a campaign to be steps away from your home. And the idea with that is that they're located in Maryville, Indiana, and they're a family-owned business that's been there since 1946. They're literally in your backyard, steps away from your home. But when you're looking for a mortgage, that is literally one of the last steps you're taking before you get those keys. You get approved, so you're literally steps away from your home. So let's go ahead in our messaging to make sure that we have that case statement, that passionate statement that we want people to remember. But again, not overly cluttering it where you have this going on, where you're trying to say far too much in a short amount of time. Then you want to be able to push them over to your website. But again, the same thing. You want to make sure that you have a great hierarchy of information when you can push them to the website, because here's where all of your information lies. But a lot of people still feel that the website can be used as an online periodical, an online newspaper where people are just going to read. And the reality is that they're not. We're a visual medium these days. So if you can go ahead and pull this out into different pieces of information where you've got some color copy that pulls that out right there. You've got a graphic on the other side, something that they can go ahead and come to, figure out what they want to do, and then jump over to it. So you're not overwhelming them in that regard either. Once again, that hierarchy of information. But then also, you want to make sure that you're mobile friendly in all of your communications as well. And this is just more of a side note. As of fourth quarter 2016, 51% of people get all of their online information from a mobile device. So if your website looks like this on a computer and they pull it up on their phone and it looks like this, they're going to have to zoom in and it's not incredibly friendly. You want to make sure that you're bringing your message to the audience. We're all emotionally driven people. We tend to make our purchases, spend our time with the organizations that connect with us. I've volunteered with March of Dimes in the past. My wife and I, prior to having a baby, we had 4 miscarriages. So working with March of Dimes and infant mortality was very, very important to us. Subaru is one of those companies that people are incredibly passionate about. What they ended up doing was taking a look at the audience that they had. And back in the late 80s, they realized that not only did they have that athletic audience that was going out and doing things on the weekends, they were hiking, they were mountain biking, they were doing those kind of things. They actually found through studies that they had a very large lesbian population that was buying Subaru. So they ended up putting a lot of their print ads and their television ads to kind of push toward that lifestyle. So they found their audience that wasn't the intended audience that they were going for, but they found that this was an audience that was drawn to them because of the brand that they had, that they moved their marketing toward that to kind of be all-inclusive with that. So that's the kind of thing too, as we're looking forward, there may be an audience out there that you're not intending to go after, but they may find you. So again, being emotionally driven, Subaru, once they embraced that audience, it grew because of that, because of the emotional aspect to it. I play guitar. So I grew up playing Fender guitars. There are other brands out there, but I am emotionally connected to Fender because it was the first guitar I ever owned. When we purchase things, we have that sense of history that we want to kind of create through that and keep going. And then you've got brands like Apple, where you're kind of at the top. You feel like you're part of a club because you have the newest iPhone or you have the iPad. Samsung is kind of catching up with that, but still Apple is that flagstone. So when we're looking at our communication, what we want to do is make sure that not only is our messaging clear and concise, but we also want to make sure that it's emotionally driven. The example that I will always use whenever I talk to people is Walmart versus Target. These are two stores that have the same products at the same price point, but you have very different opinions of those particular companies. You go into Walmart, it's high ceilings, it's very sterile. They've got the fluorescent lights that are up there. It's the white against the blue. You've got the employees that are in there wearing kind of those worker vests, those kind of things. You go into Walmart basically because they have the rollback prices. You feel like you're going to get your bargain basement price there. But everybody shops there. At the same time, how many of you are familiar with the People of Walmart website? Have you guys seen that? Where people take the embarrassing pictures of people that they find in there. Walmart kind of has that almost like, I don't want to say an Aldi feel, but they have a much lower scale feel to it. You look at Target, Target has the drop ceilings. The fluorescents are a little bit warmer. It's browns, it's red. It feels like it's more of a department store. People even call it Target, so it's got that French upper scale feel to it. But essentially, these two stores are selling the exact same things at the exact same price points. So what we need to do as nonprofits is realize that we do have 2,000 other 501c3s in this area. How do we make sure that our messaging breaks apart from that? So it's what we're calling that user experience and the brand personality. How are you differentiating yourself between this to this? So when we look at our messaging, we want to go ahead and take a look at that. As we look at Walmart, all of their ads, they've got the smiley face, it's always the rollback, everything is price oriented, and that's how they push their messaging. Where Target, on the other hand, is more of an experience-based marketing approach. So as we look at this from a nonprofit standpoint, how do we want the public to see us? That we're the kind of organization that is bringing in $100 million, but out of that, $3 million is spent on operational expenses. So $97 million goes to the cause, $97 even. Versus when we help with the Humane Society of Calumet area, a lot of people do that because they love their pets. It's that emotional connection that you have to it, more so than anything else. Going back to the print ad aspect of it, when you're looking at a Walmart versus a Target ad, everything here is busy. Everything here feels like it is a little bit of that lower scale to it. You've got this busy background that's in here. You've got these the prices that have drop shadows on them versus Target, which is a nice clean background. The prices are big, they're bold, there's no drop shadow, there's no busyness to it. As we're looking at all of these things, how do they all tie into what you want to do with your message? So essentially, what we want to talk about, or leave today thinking about, is through all of your pieces of printed information, what is your hierarchy of that information? You want people to remember your name, you want to figure out where they can find you, be it your website, your phone number, those kind of things, and then your messaging. Those essentially are the three things. If they don't have what you do or what you're pushing, be it your event, your product, your program, whatever, your logo, your name, and your contact information, everything else is kind of a waste. So again, name, logo, nice and big. Your call to action, your message, and then what is your personality? And if you don't have a personality, you need to figure out what that is. How do you want to approach it? Thanks. You rock. So.
So what I wanted to talk about is communicating vision, right? We're all a nonprofit. Unfortunately, I go to a lot of events, and I hear people are always asking for money. They want to start something, they want to do something. Also, what I hear is, we used to, then we lost the funding. I think a lot of that has to do with when we get stuck in just the mission. The mission is what you do, right? But we're no different from for-profits, right? We got to think about the future. How are you going to grow? How are you going to expand your services? Right? And that brings me back to the point of vision. Oftentimes, I think of vision as that thing you aspire to, but mostly, in a laughing way, it's that crazy person thought, right? Is she crazy? We don't do that. This is what we do now. Why are we doing that? We don't have money for that. Everyone is looking at you like you done lost your mind. We don't have the staff for that. We don't have the expertise for that. But what makes some leaders successful is how they communicate that. You could have the best vision in the world. If you don't know how to communicate it, all people hear is, wah, wah, wah. She just want this. They don't understand. We don't have this. I can't work more hours because you don't know how to communicate, right? Part of communicating your vision is visionary leaders are great. The Steve Jobs of the world, right? But what he learned was you have to do it, even though it's your vision, you got to get other people on board, right? You got to get buy-in. I think oftentimes in nonprofit, we still have a hierarchical way of leading. I mean, it's like we don't get it. We see the Googles and everyone else is around the table, and we're still doing this top-down thing. Your vision has to go be communicated around the table. Nobody's telling you, you should never compromise on your vision, but you have to be open to be swayed and influenced a little bit. I'm not saying change it completely, but if you're out there with your own drum, you look back, it's just you. And why? Because you don't know how to communicate your vision. And I often feel like people leave your lay staff behind. So yes, communicate your vision with your board. Get them on board. Because oftentimes you got to go to them for the money too, so you better make sure they're on board. Then you need your chief staff, because ultimately as a leader, you're not the one doing the work. You're just the one with the thought, the idea. You need people to implement it. So you got to get that communication with your chief team. Have meetings, have them a part of think tank groups, right? But guess who we often forget? The person who does the work every day. We'll just roll this out when we do the press release. So they'll find out about it when everybody else finds out about it. What do you get? You get staff that locks up. They lock up. They're not going to do what you want. They're going to do your 9 to 5 because they need to get paid. But they're not going to have that passion behind your vision because you didn't involve them in the process. I often tell people one of the things I believe in is participatory management. I believe in it. I embrace it. It's something I practice or try to get good at. But I often tell my team, it's not really a democracy, right? Ultimately, you are going to be the one to make the decision as a leader. But what participatory management is you get input. You make people feel like they're part of this vision, a part of this future that you see. And I think oftentimes we fail to do that. So some of the ways we can easily communicate is bring them in on the table in the beginning. When you woke up that night and you say, man, this is where I think we need to go. People like to call consultants a lot. I mean, you guys work for nonprofits. You know we just love consultants. Before you even go to your team, you hired somebody else. How is your team going to feel? You wake up with that idea, you should call your CFO. Man, I have this idea. This is where I want us to be 20 years from now. And he's still sleeping like 20 years. I'm trying to pay the bill tomorrow. You bring in the rest of your program team. This is where I think we need to be. But we don't do that now. I don't even know anything about that. That's why it's a vision. We got time to get there. We just need to put stuff in place. Then you call your lay team. If we had to do this, what do you think you would need to get it done? You have staff meeting, you have groups, you get people's input, but also, most importantly, you stay true to the vision, because I'm telling you, the creepers are there. They're the ones that are going to be there ready to tell you, no, it's not possible. You're going to fight the creepers, and you have to be okay to let some people go. Not everybody's going to be okay with the vision. Some people are going to be waiting to see it fail. I call them bless and release. Thank you. It was a pleasure working with you. You were such a great team member, but this is not where we're going right now. I don't say go fire your people because they say no. Okay, I'm just saying. But listen, it's okay to give some people up. The worst thing to your vision is a toxic person on your team. Because let me tell you, they will latch on to the goodness in that team and turn it. You have to be brave enough to let them go. He's the best CFO ever. He doesn't buy into your vision. Okay, a vision that you know have had buy-in from other people, by the way. Okay, you're not just firing him because he doesn't see where you're going. But maybe he doesn't see where you're going because you're not communicating it well. You use data. You use your community. A lot of times with nonprofit, I think that we get stuck in the mission. Mission is what we do every day. But oftentimes, the community is telling us we need to go somewhere else. And we keep fighting this thing. Well, this is what we do. But this is what your community is saying that they need. And a good visionary could see that and say, well, this is where we need to go. So they're part of your team when you're trying to communicate a vision. You get these, I call them your cheerleaders. I need my cheerleaders on my chief team. I need my cheerleaders on my program team. You also need your cheerleaders in the community. Because they're going to go explain what you can't explain because you sound crazy. Okay? But they can communicate it in a way that their peers will understand. Language is key. You know, when you go with your big board to get money and use all these fancy language because you have a high-end degree, that's not the same tool you're going to use when you're talking to somebody out there. They just want the facts. What are you trying to do? And I think oftentimes visionaries have to also be careful of this when you're communicating a vision. Is that what the community needs? Harry and I have been into meetings where somebody has a great idea. It's usually some government entity or someone with money. We're going to build parks, and we want cycling, and it sounds great. And I'll be just waiting there. Please don't say anything, Janelle. Just shh. The presumption of need. Okay? You still got to talk to the community. Your vision is great, but what do they think they need? You have a presumption of need. Or maybe they don't need it right now. They may need it in the future. So you're saying this is a future goal. My thing is you still got to get them involved. But guess what? You're going to build it, and it'll be you the only one riding that bicycle in the park. Because you know why? The community is dangerous. I'm not going to ride a bike to the park. So build it as much as you want. Okay? Because you didn't listen. So even as a visionary, you may have a goal that you want to build a park, but you still got to go based on what the community needs. So it's not just about you. It's not a solo act, right? And oftentimes I work with nonprofits, and I've worked with many nonprofits, and I'll tell you what the hardest thing is. They bring you in, we want change. And you guys have been there. You start doing the change, and then they lock up on you, because change is hard. You think change is hard today? Think about vision. They can't even see past today, much less to see where you think they should go. And oftentimes, you know, development officers always say we have a short lifespan, right? Because people want us to come in and just solve their money problem. And as communications officers, we're saying you're having a problem. Your vision isn't there. Your communication isn't there. And then if you don't bring in that money next year, guess what? You're gone. Short lifespan development officers. You know, we find it hard to get leaders to see the vision that we see, because we have vision too, because we listen, we see, we hear, and we try to communicate that. Sometimes we have a problem communicating too, right? Because we're not the leaders. You know, I have some colleagues where I say you're a leader in a non-leadership role. Sometimes that's where we are. We're not steering the ship. Because some people think leadership is because you have the title. So we have to find a way to communicate. One way we do that is facts. And though I just gave consultants a bad name, sometimes they're your tools too, right? Because oftentimes people feel better because they're paying for something that somehow is better than what you said. It just is. It's one of my toolkits. Okay, you want to pay somebody to tell you what I already told you? Good. Once the outcome is the same, right? You got to put your ego aside and sometimes come through the back. It's a communication tactic. Everything, I call it, my son is doing math, and I told him math is like a detective thingy. You have a tool pack. Your backpack has your tools to solve a crime. He's so pumped up now. I don't know how long that's going to last. But, but that's what we have. You have a lot of tools, and sometimes that means that you're going to have to take a sidestep. Your ego is going to take a hit to what you want to do and what you think the organization needs to go. But you got to use those tool bags. Consultants, not a fan of them because I think they come in and then they leave and you have to do the work and then they messed it up and you're like, I told you so. right? You're all like, yeah. But they also, people somehow listen better because they feel they're paying extra money. So honestly, they're a good tool to get your point across. Numbers matter, even though sometimes you give them all the facts in the world and they still don't see your vision. And I always say for me, I've left jobs, people ask me, why did you leave that job? When I feel like I can't make a difference anymore, that's it. If I wanted a job and I wanted to make all this money, I could have done something else. When I feel my leaders aren't listening, then I feel like I have no purpose here for you. And it's not because, it's like any relationship. I say there are no bad guys out there. They're just bad for you right now. They're not really, you're just not the right thing for them right now. And they're gonna get something that works well with them. Same thing with vision. That team may not be the right team for you right now. Doesn't make them bad. They're just having a hard time latching on to your vision. So don't go getting clones of yourself. You may need to have different opinions, okay? So that doesn't mean go firing everyone. But be okay to let some people go. So with that being said, my whole point is, it's not just about your mission. If you stop at your mission, you're done. It happened when the economy crashed. Who survived are people who thought way ahead. Can't get stuck in the mission. It's not just about providing food, right? It's about, big vision is no one will ever go without lunch. No one? No one? That's ambitious. But that's what vision is, right? Lofty. If you just stick to, well, I have to serve 25 people today and the grant said 40, you're going to get stuck. You're going to be left behind. You know, I started my career in New York, and New York is a different beast, right? I mean, oh, you'll love being a development officer in New York. The checks you see, the galas you can plan, fabulous. But what I learned from being in New York is they don't do things in a small way. They believe you have to spend money to make money. You know how hard it is to try to explain that here in the Midwest? You know, they spent money and made money. They treated nonprofit like a business. That's their vision. You know, they didn't just try to make payroll. You know, you guys all wish you worked there, huh? I had galas at the Waldorf Astoria, checks that. Then I decided, I just want to help. So I'm going to go. So I decided to do the trenches now. But my whole point is they have a different vision on how they treat nonprofits and how they go after money. And they're not afraid to go after big money. You know, I try to sell planned giving here. It's the toughest thing. People are uncomfortable talking to people about death. True visionaries got to say, hey, you are going to die one day. I just want to make sure that I get your money because you already invested in that, and be okay with that. Why is this community so shy about death and money? Okay? You got to be okay to ask and go beyond just the day-to-day trenches. And so that's what I'm asking you to do. Think beyond your mission. Everybody talks about their mission statement, but very few people talk about the vision statement. How many of us know our vision statement? You get stuck if you stop at your mission. Okay? Think about where we're going to be. What we're really trying to do is really make the place a better place. Oh, is that Michael Jackson? Mm-hmm. So, again, thank you guys. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Vision.
So the last of our three parts then, and what we wanted to try and do today was look at communication, the key to it all. Do I have clarity of case? When should I call, write, text, visit? When to use technical jargon? And what does my brand and style say? So we, once again, wanted to jump on a fair amount of topics and get the toolbox bolstered a little bit for you in terms of today. Do I hit one? No? Great. So, the old teacher in me comes out a fair amount when I stop and think about how we deal with our boards, how we deal with our donors, how we deal with our staff. And I always go back to, I taught sophomores American history for a long time. And when you're in a classroom with 35 kids, you have to remember that you're really the conductor of 35 different instruments, if you will, in there. Some kids are verbal. They just want to talk about stuff. They want you to talk to them about it. They want to get themselves wrapped around it. Others are visual learners. They want to sit. They don't want you stimulating them in any other way than letting them look and absorb and think, right? Other kids are physical learners, and we know who they are. They're the kid who is the one who suffers the most in America's classroom, right? They have to go into a prison cell for 43 minutes until the bell rings and they get to go to their next prison cell. You just feel, you can see that kid. He's tapping his toe. That little girl is just, she's doodled more than possible, you know, in that classroom. So I would like everybody to try and keep in mind, do you in fact interface in particular with your teams and with your donors and with your board members, keeping in mind what style of learner they are? Because sometimes if you're really, really going to make sure that you have sharp arrows in your quiver, you know that when you write board member B, you're going to get back a 4-page, highly detailed memo. Now, do you want that? If that's what you want to deal with, okay, that's great. That person may become the board chair and you have to deal with that. Sometimes you're going to have a board member that doesn't want an email at all. In fact, at some point in time, they may become rather abrupt with regard to saying, do you know that I have a very big job and I have 7,000 emails a day that I have to get through? If you want to deal with me, pick up the phone and call me. I'd rather spend 30 seconds with you than have to find you as email 489 in today's inbox. So the first thing that I have on our sheet there, do we in fact remember that we have visual learners and auditory learners? The other part is, and we've all been around members of the team or members of the board or whoever it may be, who are extroverts versus introverts. I had a board member who was a highest probably rated introvert you could think of. They barely had their hand up to say yay in votes in a board meeting. But man, did they like to go back to their office and really, really think about what went on in the board meeting and then send an email or make a phone call or what have you. And I think that's another thing in terms of communication we want to keep in mind. Don't just walk lockstep with regard to how you run your meetings, how you set your agendas up, how you run your task forces or your committees. Introverts are going to be totally different than extroverts. We tend to all think that everybody who walks into a room is an extrovert. And that's how we run our meetings. That's how our meeting dynamic is created, is to take care of extroverts. Well, what about the introverts? So that's what I have as your thought bubbles with regard to dealing with communications.
He's not a good clicker. He talks faster than he clicks, so I'm sorry. There you go.
Thank you. Here's a couple of quick thoughts for you with regard to the use of email as we move forward. I think we've lost sight of the fact that we are all in the people business. Humans should communicate with each other. Email is dry, cold, calculating, callous. It is important for us, but I think that we have to keep in mind that email is often used as the instrument that allows you out of a tough situation. So there was this old priest that used to remind us all the time in Cleveland that the sign of a poor Irishman is the one that doesn't realize that life is tough. And so you can think about that in the windshield time going home. Email allows us to, in fact, continue that thought process. Sometimes we have to confront people. Confrontation does not equal World War III. Oftentimes, you're stepping into the world of email to avoid a tough conversation pours more gasoline on the fire. All I'm trying to make sure that we keep in mind is if it is a hard conversation, if you are dreading it and you are sitting in front of your computer writing it, stop and pick up the phone and say, can we have a coffee? You're going to get a whole heck of a lot further with a 30-minute coffee than you are spending 30 minutes writing that email and spending all your time trying to make sure you craft it in such a way that it's all politically correct. Forget it. Have the hard conversation. Email can be used to win conversations. So I used to be a coach, and there was an old saying with the coaching staff, the man who had the chalk last always won. Okay? And that meant, basically, that if I'm the last guy at the board and I'm drawing a play, I'm going to make sure my play gets into the end zone, and that's why we're going to run this play. Well, the same thing holds true here. There are people who are introverted who will in fact say, I'm going to make sure that you know who's in charge here, and I'm going to make sure I hammer it home in an email. With no interface, no real pushback, unless it comes back electronically. Email can be used to win conversations. You know you're in a dysfunctional situation at work if you're engaged in email battling. Nothing good comes from it. Emails don't convey tone, emotion, or empathy. Great leaders are empathetic. If you go down to the next grouping, phone builds trust, creates a genuine atmosphere. We're in the people business. Don't you want to spend some time? Don't you want to have 30 seconds to say, geez, how did that camping trip go? I know you've been looking forward to it for 2 months. We're in the people business. Be genuine. Build relationships. People give to people. The phone reminds us that we are all in the people business. The phone allows us for rapid clarity. Janelle will tell you this. Courtney will tell you this. It takes me 45 minutes to respond to an email. I'm just not that kind of guy. But I can gladly get on the phone with you or meet with you for 10 minutes and we'll have a phenomenal amount of clarity. We'll be able to get real granular really quick. I highly recommend in those cases that you go to the next grouping for email. Email allows for a paper trail. You do have to make sure that in this day and age you're using whatever it may be in terms of creating a paper trail. You may want to create a paper trail in terms of if you are working with an employee and you are beyond the point of assistance and you're into the point of assessment, that you are creating that paper trail. I don't think email should ever be used to create a situation where you're going to sandbag somebody. That's just inappropriate, right? Email allows for very specific materials to be distributed for a conversation. Janelle mentioned planned giving. If you want to be involved in a conversation with a charitable remainder trust and what's the difference between that and a uni trust and what's the difference between that and a donor advised fund, you want to have those 3 instruments in front of you so that you can in fact see the difference between a uni trust, a charitable advised, or a donor advised, right? Because there's all kinds of bullet points in there that allow you to sit down and talk with a donor about what's the most appropriate way to go. Email is also great for scheduling. Yeah, it is. But I think it's also important to realize that the phone allows for the exchange of sensitive information. I don't know if it's me looking at the news too much, but it seems like every time somebody steps into a hole, they say that somebody hacked my account. I don't know. There's a lot of people out there hacking personal accounts when somebody sends something out that they're not happy about, but phone does allow for that. Phone allows for nuances and emotion. Of course, we want to be able to find out, is the person bored? Are they upset about the topic we're talking about? They were in the task force meeting about should we have the gala. And they just they weren't in the meeting in a hyped up way. They left the meeting disgruntled. Well, get on the phone and talk to them and find out why don't you want to do the gala. Let's get that out on the table. And the phone also allows for relationship building. We're in the people business. And I think in this day and age that we are seeing the pendulum swing too much to the side of email. That's my own personal opinion. Maybe it's Clint Eastwood, get off my lawn guy. But we're in the people business. Now, there's nothing wrong with, in fact, having the good conversation and then setting the follow-up email that says, Amanda, it was great to see you today. We've talked about the following 3 things. And you put down the topic, you put down the date, you put down the action step, and now you're looking good. You go from an email culture, and so I'll just share with you. I happen to have been a consultant, and I was in a room, and the individual was sitting where Janelle is, and I asked a question. That individual texted the individual sitting where Matt is. I asked the question. That individual texted the person that they could touch. That's crazy. I mean, that's crazy. I do know that there are individuals, and I'm not going to use the M word, that's the only means by which they know how to communicate. Is Snapgram, Instafix, FaceTime. I mean, let's get a grip here, okay? But we do know that in large group presentations, as Matt has alluded to, as Janelle has alluded to, the great source for me as a team member, for Courtney, is we have to communicate with large groups via email. That's the way of the world. Statistics have shown that there are 3 things that allow you to be effective as a non-for-profit communicator. Number 1, tell great stories. Tell great stories, make them short and sweet. We've kind of crossed over the boundary of infographics. Remember how that was the rage for 3 years. Every office you went into had an 11 by 17. How many clients did you have that wanted infographics? USA Today destroyed the notion of sitting down and reading a newspaper. USA Today created factoids. If you don't have 9 boxes that are going to tell me the 3 things that I can win on Jeopardy with, I'm not going to spend my time with you. Quality of content. You can still tell great stories. Make them short and sweet. That's number 1. Number 2, the level of attention you're receiving on those. Courtney creates a weekly report with regard to our metrics. So you got a dashboard. There is no way of getting around it. Don't think you're going to send balloons out and know where they land. You do know where they land through your metric analysis. And then thirdly, don't just create it in your windshield time from Dunkin' Donuts with your coffee to your office. Now, you can, in fact, think along those lines and say that might be a great thing for our content, but make sure it plows into your plan. Your plan's got to have. You know what your calendar looks like. Everyone in this room knows when their special events are. Everyone in this room knows when you want to ramp up getting ready for end of the year giving. Everybody in this room knows when you want to have your gift planning stuff go out with regard to sitting down with people to talk about death and dying. Content, contributors. Reach out. This is a great opportunity. We're working hard internally here to make sure that we have multiple contributors. We have 1,500 alums in the L&I program, 1,500 leaders in Northwest Indiana, 1,500 oracles of expertise in a variety of areas. Who are our contributors? And then lastly, a schedule, and stay to it. Stick to your schedule. If you're training people to make sure that on Fridays at 11 o'clock that ping they hear is Lakeshore Media, don't let them down. Statistics show that great non-for-profits communicate minimally once a week. Minimally. If we wanted to go back here and in our plan really create a Schedule C, A, B, and C, we would create a schedule for first-time donors. We would create a schedule for foundations and corporate donors. We would be tailoring our messaging specifically to our constituency markets. Now that's great for those shops that have 4 people. in communications. I look around this room and I have the great pleasure of knowing many of you have a whopping staff of one who handles all of this. So I'm not even going to kid ourselves in terms of that, other than to say that you do have the ability to work with your development committee or your communications and marketing committee or your communications and marketing task force, and you should sit down and say, let's craft our content, because it's going to help you in the long run who already have 27 other plates spinning, that you know what the content is, your contributors, and your schedule. At least once a week, that's your goal. Your goal at least once a week is one that is content driven. You're giving them great stories. You're telling them phenomenal things. Okay, so let's shift gears real quick. That's me getting off my soapbox with regard to email versus phone. And I do want to let you know that in a previous life as a consultant, I really did hammer home the importance of case. I was a funder at one time. I could always tell the individuals who did not have clarity of case because their grant proposals were in fact frenetic. They were full of buzzwords, but they didn't come right out and talk to us about why should I at the Legacy Foundation write you a check to take care of what you do? Clarity of case. Everybody should know the case. I'll give you an exercise. At the next board meeting, ask for 5 minutes for your mission moment. And the 5 minutes in the mission moment should be, ask every one of your board members to write down the 4 ACEs. Every board member should know the 4 ACEs of your program. If they can't write down the 4 ACEs, they can't do their job for you out in the public. If they can't say, we take care of children who are developmentally challenged, we are a resource for families and caregivers who are strained to the max with regard to having that child as a part of their life. We do community education with regard to where these families and these clients can be mainstreamed. I'm making that up. Okay? Take the time to find out if your ambassadors, your guardians of your mission, that's what a board member is, the guardian of the mission, do they have the ability to in fact give you the 4 ACEs? Every single one of your case statements should be donor-centric, not you-centric. You're creating a case statement for support. Write it in the eyes and the lens of the donor. Is it mission-driven? This is a great exercise for you to make sure that you don't have mission creep, that you aren't in fact going off into rabbit holes where in fact that's not what you're supposed to be doing. Are you staying true to why you got your 501c3? Your case should explain your need as well as your outcomes. Don't ask people to write a check into a black hole. Ask people to write a check for outcome. And it creates an invitation for support. That's a solid case. The case of support, what does the case look like? Let's not turn this into the Manhattan Project, okay? Cases can become something they're not supposed to be. A case, it should take you a week to write a good case, and you should do it annually. It should be thought-provoking and emotional. People give to people. Tug on the heartstrings. Talk about the fact that Tom lives in the Maryville neighborhood, and without Tom receiving Meals on Wheels every day, Tom would probably not be self-sufficient anymore. He'd be in a home. You know all the phenomenal things that Meals on Wheels does. You have to talk about your mission and, as Janelle alluded to, vision. People want to see that this organization is in fact not status quo, that you have the ability to present that we are going to have a profound impact not only this year, but for years to come. Do a brief history. Not a history, please, don't give them 27 pages of John Smith was the founding member of the development committee and no. Give them a brief history. Talk about your programs, products, and people. Don't miss out on the 3 Ps. Okay, don't just go right into program. Talk about program, product, and people. Talk about your outcomes. your financial overview. So you have to be tight with regard to your budget. You have to be tight with regard to the fact that you've created a case for a reason. You're asking someone to give you support, just as if you were asking someone to make a business investment, you're asking for a philanthropic investment. And they want to see what their ROI is going to be. If I give you $500,000, what's the return on that philanthropic investment? How many children are going to be impacted? How many clients? How many families? How much tonnage of food are you going to, in fact, be able to process? Always ask. Number one reason why people don't give is they weren't asked. Always ask. This is the beginnings of your conversation with individuals. The case for support, what do we keep in mind while creating the case? Don't create a patchwork quilt of a case. Oftentimes, what happens is you walk in and you say to the program manager, hey, would you write about program? And then you go down to the treasurer's office and you say to the CFO, hey, would you mind writing about our, and the next thing you know, you have 9 pieces of information that are, in fact, a patchwork quilt. The reader is going to be like, what the heck is going on here? Keep the same voice throughout. Keep in mind your target constituency. Are you writing a case statement for annual support? That's an entirely different case statement than for major gift work. Keep your constituency groups in line. Gather support materials and conduct appropriate debrief interviews. In other words, you have to do an internal communications audit. Go and find out every single stinking number 9 stuffer that's been distributed in the last year. Look at every invitation. So that's why we look at Matt and we talk about no wonder we were a failure. We had case confusion in our invitation to our gala. We used 2 different logos and 13 fonts. We didn't use a color that was in our style guide. And the person we're giving the award to has never even been in our building. So take a look at your support materials. You get a lot of work done by doing an internal audit, right? And also debrief interviews. Talk to the chairman of the board. Talk to your lead volunteer. Talk to a family that's been impressed by what they have gained from their relationship with you. Build that into case. Circulate your rough. Janelle spoke to it earlier. I cannot hammer home enough. The more eyes and ears and hands that you have on first pass roughs, the more buy-in you're going to get, the more clarity you're going to develop. Get back out a revised draft quickly, and then seek final sign-off from key stakeholders. Your CEO, your board chair, the development chair, you want them nodding their head. It should no case statement should be more than 10 pages long. The University of Chicago ran a $200 million campaign with a 3-page case. Case doesn't have to be some crazy document. You know you have a great case, so here's where you're at. If you're sitting there going, I have a case, we've been working with the case, and the case is, I like the case. Well, I ask you to quickly analyze, are your constituencies in fact confused, so they're not informed? Are they responding to your invitations to participate? If the answer is no, then your case is not doing what it's supposed to. And in fact, are they writing checks? If you're seeing no uptick in annual giving, special event giving, major gift giving, willing to sit down and talk about a planned gift, then your case is in fact not as strong as you thought it was. A great case keeps people informed, invites people to participate, and always asks for an investment.